Hello, and welcome to the Northwest Naturalist Notebook. I'm your host, Kirsten, the Northwest Naturalist. Let's jump in. In this episode in our Nature Journaling is Learning series, we're going to talk more about A, which is for ask. As an educator, working with students on how to ask questions or how to ask better questions is something that I've spent a lot of time on. And as a naturalist, it's a skill that I feel like I'm still working on myself. We've grown so used to the idea of immediately finding the answer to the questions we have. And like so many things, nature often has its own plans. There are many different ways to approach asking questions, and one that I often find myself using is Costa's levels of thinking, which has three tiers to help us ask deeper questions. The first is level one questions, or the Googleable questions. These are the easiest to ask and to answer. They have a right answer and wrong answers. Though it's important to remember as scientists and naturalists that based on new data and information, the right answer to a question might change over time. These are the questions that we could choose to use tools like cell phones, computers, books to find that answer, though it may not always be the best choice for deepening our learning. Next is level two questions or noodle questions. And no, I'm not talking about pasta. Level two questions are where we start going a little bit deeper and we have to noodle or think about the answers and the questions that we're asking. It also means that we might not all have the same questions that come up or even the same answers to them. When we practice skills like inference or compare and contrast, or we start looking at explanations that are not as straightforward, it requires us to take a bit more time to think about our questioning process. And that brings us to level three, doodle questions. Now, I know you might be thinking, especially with an idea like nature journaling, doesn't doodle mean drawing? And in this case, no. What I mean by doodle is you need to do a little more work in order to get to an answer. If I were to ask a level three question to a room of 30 people, I could get 30 different answers because each person's experience and background knowledge is different. But these questions are a lot more fun to really dig into an answer because they give us that chance to use our imagination and make predictions or a hypothesis, which is a lot more fun when we blend that creativity and scientific thought together. So we've talked a little about asking questions, but what about finding the answers? As a society, we've become very comfortable with the idea that we can just reach over, grab a tool, and be able to find the answer to the question that we're asking. But when nature journaling, there's also something to be said for maybe not rushing to that solution. That when we're taking the time to sit in a nature nook and really be present, that we might find something more interesting in that process by even just taking that time to pause. It's also important to remember that sometimes questions don't lead to answers, they lead to other questions. And following that chain of questions can be really fun too. I'm still learning to be comfortable with this in my own nature journal and use a lot of color or different types of boxes or bubbles to group together the questions on my page that are related to one another. If you're interested in seeing another neat example, I recommend checking out the work of fellow journaler Fiona Galogly, who has a really amazing way of approaching this strategy. Now we come to the challenge for this episode. I challenge you to bring your nature journal out into the field and find something that kind of catches your attention, seems interesting. And I want you to write down the first question that comes to mind about it. And then don't go looking for the answer. I want you to follow that question and see what the next question it leads you to is. And then the next one, and the next. Don't worry about jumping to the answers. You can always add those later. But see how long it takes for you to kind of get through some of those questions. And make sure you keep in mind those opportunities to move from level 1 to level 2 or 3. Nature journaling can be a really fun way for us to pursue our curiosity and really follow where it leads us. So until next time, I'm Kirsten, the Northwest Naturalist, wishing you happy exploring.